The American middle class is the motor of the Western world. It's the motor, has been until recently, the motor not just of the American economy, its spending power, but of the global economy. And the fact that that motor gets a little bit weaker with each fresh business cycle, or actually quite a lot weaker with each fresh business cycle, if you take the last two, including the one we're in the middle of, is profoundly worrying because people don't have the answers. Policymakers don't have the answers in terms of what to do about this. So it's with a great sense of foreboding and also of feeling troubled that I wrote this book.
What's interesting is you say that no policymaker has an answer.
No policy, in 08, if you'd ask any observer or any economist in 08, are our assumptions going to be revisited? Are we going to look at the paradigm that we have that led up to 08, that collapsed, if you like, in the rubble of Lehman Brothers? People would have predicted that by 2012 there would have been a lot more of a radical rethinking would have gone on than we've seen. There's been very little challenging. There's been very little challenge of the basic underlying assumptions of how this economy works. We've seen in the last few months unemployment fall.
Right.
A welcome drop of about 200,000 a month, and on Friday, tomorrow, we'll get the April numbers. But these new jobs that are being created are at a significantly lower wage than the ones that they're replacing that were destroyed. So the market is clearing at a lower price each time. Mm-hmm. The great sort of tide lifting all boats is working in the opposite direction. And we don't really have a rethinking of this model. I think the assumption is all we need from the non-Tea Party types is all we need is to get more fuel in the engine, and the engine will work fine. But actually the engine isn't working fine. It's a far more fundamental problem that we're talking about here.
Is it because our politics is dysfunctional?
It doesn't help. I mean, there are some solutions, that are obvious,
right.
That don't require that much rethinking, such as proper, lifting up American infrastructure to first world level, research and development, education, that, it is more difficult to imagine being implemented than to imagine what the policy should be. So that doesn't help. But I don't think these kinds of measures in themselves address. This is a very large problem we're talking about.
It has to do with our education, it has to do with everything.
It has to do with everything. I mean, interestingly, if you mention K through 12, you mention education, the stagnation there in terms of your performance of the schools also dates back to the 70s. America was effectively #1 in most things until the 60s. And now it's below 20, below 30.
It's an interesting thing, too, because it is a time in which you need presidential leadership. Mm-hmm. You need the bully pulpit. And
we're not seeing much of that. To be fair to Obama...
No, that's what I was saying by being fair. There are multiple voices. It's harder to mount that bully pulpit, not that somehow he doesn't have the skills to do it or doesn't want to do it.
If I was going to criticize Obama, though, Franklin Roosevelt had a bold, persistent experimentation. He didn't actually know the answer.
Right.
He didn't actually have a paradigm. He knew that the world had been ripped up and that experimentation was needed. New things were going to have to be tried. And I don't see that kind of out-of-the-box radical thinking from this administration. It's fairly safe on the economy. It's stuck within fairly conventional orthodox bounds. And that might be understandable. They've had a fire to put out. Why should we expect them to be drawing up architects' plans for a new house? It's easy for us to say.
But you could ask, in the age of dissent, America has two things. One, it has, it is a place of universal values, an appreciation of universal values. And secondly, it has a spirit of innovation like nobody else.
I would agree with both. And look, I'm not saying this is not a simplistic world where America's relative economic decline means China is the next superpower. China is never going to be a country of mass immigration. It's never going to be an attractive country that will command the kind of leadership that America can command. So the decline in American competitiveness, which I think is real, is quite a complex phenomenon. There are a lot of places competing better with America before, which leads me to your second point about American innovation. America remains the most innovative country in the world, but its overwhelming, commanding lead in innovation is only really strongly apparent still in the social media sector. If you look across sectors like biotech, semiconductors, they've been losing that overwhelming advantage in Silicon Valley and elsewhere for quite a while now. And if you look at the rate of entrepreneurialism in America, there's nothing more American than starting up a business. It's now at its lowest level